Yes, yes, Mr. Luck, Fortuna, yes. And that at the highest, it could be inferred or pitched that the father may have had some investments in crypto coin or had an involvement with some criminal syndicate that was unrelated to my client, Mr. Fortuna.
Okay, okay.
There are no further questions. This
No.
brings me to the end of my rebuttals. Thank you, Mr. President.
Who's doing the rebuttal?
I'll be doing the rebuttal.
Sorry, Sir rebuttal. Yep, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. President. So, Appellant Counsel's first rebuttal, the essence of it was that the underperformance was not intentional and that this is supported by the fact that the player was already feeling under the weather prior and this had been informed. However, our submission to this would be if indeed the underperformance stemmed from fatigue, then it's not explainable why the underperformance had to occur right at the moment the betting anomalies could be exploited. Because if fatigue was the issue, then the performance should be gradually deteriorating throughout the game. However, as we had seen in my earlier submissions, up until at the 80th minute, the players' performance had drastically improved. That is right after the markets came back into position. Therefore, we once again wish to highlight the fact that the underperformance had occurred right at the moment that was required for the syndicate to exploit the betting anomalies. And for this reason, we would reject the theory or the idea that the underperformance was genuine.
I don't know, man. I mean, have you heard of a team called Manchester United? They were very well known for many years for the last 10 minutes of the game. Because they could be 3-0 down, they could be 4-0 down. Okay, maybe not 4-0, but 3-0 at least. Within the last 10 minutes, they will score enough to level or even leapfrog the opposing. And it could be, there could be the other interpretation that, perhaps the Iridonian coach had trained his people in this way. So what I'm saying is that, can we really say that the players underperformed and only within the last 10 minutes they started to have a second win and do much better because of the betting patterns? I don't know. It seems to be a bit far.
I'll answer that question in two parts, Mr. President. So firstly, with regard to the potential analogy with Manchester United, we note here that prior to the 80th minute where the appellant started playing proper, he was allegedly, according to the appellant's theory, so fatigued that he made poor decisions such as allowing the ball to pass right through his hands. Now, we would definitely argue that this would not have been within the coach's foresight or would not have been a game plan because it directly penalizes them. And it does not make sense to say that if this was caused by fatigue, then somehow the fatigue does not allow him to play poorly at the 80th minute further into the game when one would argue that the player has probably gotten more fatigued. Thus, we would still argue that this theory does not make sense. And moreover, we understand Mr. President's reservations in solely looking at this particular player anomaly. And for that reason, we would say that this claim that there was intentional underperformance is corroborated by not just the playing anomalies, but also the betting anomalies, and also the witness statement, and also the dodgy coin transfer. Now, if Mr. President has no further questions with regard to the first rebuttal, I'll move on to address the second rebuttal, which is, in essence, the appellant has looked at the timeline and it stated that given the 50,000 Dogecoin transfer had occurred prior to the game, it must have been a separate event that is not linked to the game, and that and his basis for stating this is that he claims that if the transfer had occurred prior, there's no way that a particular agreement could have been reached beyond that point in time. However, our submission in this theory is that the 50,000 Dogecoins was a reward to Look Fortuna for getting the appellant to underperform. Thus, that's the first part of the agreement. And their end of that agreement would be to underperform such that the syndicate can exploit the betting anomalies and possibly earn more than 50,000 Dogecoins. Thus, the appellant's theory falls apart when we understand that the 50,000 Dogecoins is not being stated as the returns of that whole transaction. Rather, it's the first part of the transaction which was promised to the appellant and his father in order to deliver their end of that promise, which is to underperform. And this theory corroborates with the betting anomalies, with the timing in which the player had underperformed, and also the witness statement. So I end my rebuttals.
Okay. Thank you.